Yes, this is it. Voice of Africa Radio is 7 minutes after 7. I have with me in the studio Elizabeth Jones, Kevin Parkin, and Mahmoud Fiaz is joining us now. It is now over 10 years since the devolved legislature administrations were re-established in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Each arrangement has developed differently, but each has moved towards further devolution from Westminster. The evolving devolution settlement prompt equal questions about the representation of the founding of all part of the United Kingdom. Elizabeth.
Yes.
The devolution, English voters for English law. Which legislation will be English legislation that needs to be voted upon by English voters? And if so, what is the stand of the United Kingdom?
Well, I can give you our party's policy. That's the UKIP. In 2010, it was part of UKIP's manifesto to have English votes for English laws. And in 2011, UKIP prepared a policy paper called Union for the Future. The Labour Party allowed the 1997 referendums for Scotland and Wales, and as a result of that, Scotland has devolved powers as follows. So Scotland has complete control over health, education, housing, sports and arts, agriculture, forestry, fishing, tourism, planning, social work and emergency services. So those areas Scotland has complete control over. The UK Parliament obviously reserves its right to legislate on any matter. However, the UK Parliament will have to ask the Scottish Parliament for permission to make any law with regard to the devolved powers. Now, bearing in mind, we are paying Scotland a very significant lump sum, the Barnett formula lump sum every year. Unfortunately, I can't get accurate figures for the last couple of years, but in 2008 we paid Scotland 26 billion. We paid Wales 13 billion, Northern Ireland 8 billion, and the Scottish Assembly Parliament actually cost 68 million. I think that really we either have a say or we don't have a say. That the Scottish MPs either have a say in the over the English laws, or they don't. We say no, you're not allowed to have any say over the English laws. At the moment, they have a significant say. There are 59 Scottish MPs. On the 19th of September, Nigel Farage wrote to all of them, urging them not to vote on any English matter until the wider constitutional settlement had been resolved. And they refuse to do that. Now,
why shouldn't they vote on? Let me go to Kevin. Do you think that it would be prudent for Westminster to say that we don't want Scottish MPs to vote on English issues, and which issues will be English and which, of course, will be Scottish?
Well, I think the Socialist Party's of Great Britain's position on this devolution business is we look at it differently. We take the view that if you're Scottish and there was been devolution, it really didn't matter whether you were employed by Scottish businesses or English businesses, because as workers you're still being exploited by the capitalist system. The Socialist Party is looking towards a situation where everyone gets the same rights in terms of voting, and we're not over concerned about the devolution in the sense that it's either Scottish, English, or whatever.
Well, Mahmoud, the stand of Liberal Democrats when it comes to the devolution, because the Liberal Democrats wouldn't go out for Scottish MPs to vote on certain issues in the Westminster that borders on the English people.
Well, let me just explain something to you why Scottish and Welsh MPs do vote in Westminster. Westminster doesn't represent English Parliament, it represents the UK Parliament. Therefore, when the vote takes place in UK Parliament, it has an ongoing effect on people of Wales and Scotland. And that's something that, people need to be aware of, really. As for our party, as you know very well, we're for devolution. We believe English, Scottish, Welsh, if you have much smaller government, much more current, they can deal much more better with the local issues.
Well, Elizabeth, you are of the view that the Scottish MPs shouldn't vote when it comes to laws that borders on England.
No, not when it's... Well, what we say is that the Scottish MPs should not vote or partake in any debates concerning matters that they have devolved for themselves. And as I stated earlier, the Scottish Assembly has rounded up health, education, housing, sports and arts, agriculture, forestry, fishing, tourism, planning and social work and emergency services. So the Scottish Assembly, as a result of the Labour legislation 1997, has basically ring-fenced that entirely for themselves. So as a taxpayer living in England, I am paying tax which goes to the Barnett formula, which helps subsidise Scotland with regard to their free university, free Scottish bridges, free prescriptions, but I have no say at all in how that money is spent, whereas the Scottish MP has a significant say in how health monies are spent in the United Kingdom. And the best example of that is 2003 legislation, which brought in the trust fund for the trust fund hospital. That again was the Labour policy. That only came about because the Scottish MPs banded together to give the Labour Party enough of a majority to pass that as law. And of course, as you can see, that has resulted in the Staffordshire hospital catastrophe. So what we are saying is we do not interfere in those areas of policy. So please don't interfere in those areas of policy in England and Wales.
If you don't want the Scottish to interfere in those policies, then Scottish should be an independent country. Then you have to say that if your MPs are not allowed to deliberate and vote upon issues that really borders on England, why should they be part of the United Kingdom by not having a separate country?
Well, we just recently had the ballot on that, and the Scottish people wanted to stay in the Union. We do want Scotland in the Union. The other areas that the Scottish Assembly has no control over that we do, we all have to partake in that. That's defence, foreign policy and employment. So there's still some areas reserved to Scotland. But what we say is that it is inherently unfair and it creates a democratic deficit. So basically the Scottish MPs have two votes. They have the Scottish Assembly vote and they have the UK Parliament vote. We say that causes a democratic deficit, and if we are really genuinely going to live in a federated Britain, no federation should have control or influence over the other. So Scotland should not be able to interfere in health policy as it did in 2003.
Well, Mahmoud, when we went in for the referendum, Mr. Cameron,
what isn't my Mr. Cameron?
Mr. Nick Clegg and Ed Miliband, they were all there promising heavens to the Scotland that they will further devolve the Scottish Parliament. So why now is Cameron coming back to say that, we don't want the Scottish MPs to vote when it comes to matters that borders on England?
Well, I'm no spokesman for Cameron, nor do I have any intention of becoming one for him. So that's a question we'll have to ask him. As for Liberal policy, as you know, we've always been for devolution.
You're in coalition with them, so
right.
Any decision made by the coalition party, junior partner or whatever, you have to have
over the real issue of what the two we are in a marriage of convenience, and that's what it is. Because that's it. We left. Well, we can divorce, but then would you want to become economically like Greece has? You got to think a bit more further, not just of party politics and tribal politics, but think of the country, think of the schools, the hospitals. All of these things have to be thought through. So we, if we divorce, it makes good headline newspapers.
Well, I'll take the view. Liberal Democrats are basically Tories about the kicking boots. They don't want to get their boots dirty. But any of these parties, the LibDems, the UKIP, the Tories, they're all capitalist parties. They're not going to do, and everything's managed by Westminster now. There's hardly any devolvement from that point of view. And none of these parties are going to do anything for working people.
So what does capitalism has to do with the devolution of powers to the... Well,
we're saying, what I originally said is, if the Scots had got the vote and they won the vote and they succeeded from Britain, what was the benefit to the Scottish people to be ruled by Scottish bosses rather than English bosses? They're still being exploited. We want to live in a fairer system. We don't want to live under capitalism. We want to live under a socialist world where things are held in common by all the people.
So the Scottish are arguing that in as much as they have some powers on certain policies like health, education, and now we promise them of tax as well, they want to stay like that and be part of the United Kingdom and make decisions for all. So they can have the right to vote in Westminster. But Conservative is saying that, no, we want the Scottish MPs to stay away, just as UKIP is saying that we want the Conservative MPs to stay away of issues that borders on English people. So why do we? Why do they want that policy?
I think Cameron would have said anything. I mean, I think he would have sold his aunt or his grandmother to get that vote for England. And the Liberal Democrats have been hand in glove with the Tories throughout the whole of the austerity measures, when ordinary working class people have been richer at times when the rich have got richer.
Well, you still tune into Voice of Africa Radio. It's 17 minutes after 7 o'clock. You're listening to Elizabeth Jones, Mahmoud, Fiaz, and Kevin Parkins of Socialist Party of Great Britain, and we're still on the devolution and vote English laws. English people voting for English laws. Elizabeth.
Yes.
The question of West Lothian.
Oh, the West Lothian question, yes.
The relevance of the West Lothians and the English law for English people.
Yes.
How do we reconcile the two?
Well, it's very interesting that you brought that up, because I think that was originally in a concept brought about by Enoch Powell and then Tam Dayal. So we've got polarisation there. We've got a very right-wing Tory and Tam Dayal, opposites philosophically, but both addressing this question. And this English votes for English laws has been a long time coming, and I think it has been a bit of a festering sore within democratic circles. So what the situation is, I mean, how we would organise that, you could potentially, let's say, remove Scottish MPs from the House of Commons. You could have a situation whereby the Scottish MPs perhaps can discuss matters or hear legislation but can't be involved in any amendments. Indeed, William Hague has given Labour and the Lib Dems about an 8-week deadline till the end of November to come up with a cross-party agreement concerning English votes for English laws. Otherwise, he says this is going to be a general election issue. Now, if we look at it...
But Labour Party has clearly said that it's not going to take part in these deliberations and discussions on this law.
Well, you're saying that. That's obviously for survival reasons, because 40 of the 59 MPs in Scotland are Labour, and at the moment Labour has 39.7% of the seats in the House of Commons, and if this were to go through, they would be reduced to 35%. So their power base would be reduced quite considerably. They wouldn't be able to push through the agenda that they're seeking. So of course they want to have their cake and eat it. Basically, they want to be able to give out devolution to Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, but not to England. So I don't know how that's going to resolve itself. As I said, we are supported the making good of the democratic deficit. We say there should be a mechanism in place whereby the Scottish MPs simply cannot legislate or vote on the areas that they have taken for themselves in the Scottish Parliament. Now, mysociety.org actually did an analysis of votes and actually discovered that only 21 votes over 3,000 since 1997 would have gone differently if Scottish MP votes did not count. However, they did count in 3 very critical areas. That is, the Scottish MPs managed to give Tony Blair his majority. The Scottish MPs managed to give Gordon Brown his majority. And, of course, in 2003, the Scottish MPs gave... Are
we basing on these statistics to say that, okay, if these people are giving the Labour Party the majority, therefore UKIP and Conservative do not want the Scottish MPs to adapt to Labour Party so that Labour could always get majority in England? Therefore, we should deny them the right to vote on issues that really matter in Parliament.
That is, of course, that is a tactical manoeuvre. Yes, of course, that's the reason why we want to do it. However,
is it in the interest of the United Kingdom?
Yes, it is, because 85% of the voting public lives in England. So the people who live in England basically have the democratic balance in their favour. However, they can't legislate alone over their own particular areas like health, education, housing, without having input from Scotland. As I said earlier, in 2003, Tony Blair was only able to get in the foundation hospital legislation because of the assistance of the Scottish MPs. Which
Mahmoud, you're always against the foundation of hospital arrangement, which was
PFI,
yes. Which was won by Tony Blair. So this is a very vital distance for you, that you wouldn't want the Scottish MPs to vote on issues that really...
PFI, and again, my socialist friend and I take his son, I agree with a lot what he says. PFI was nothing to do with improving a health service. It was clearly to privatise and profiteer from the sick. And that's why we're against it. It's sold our hospitals privately through the back door. It should never have been allowed.
So you would not also want the Scottish MPs to vote on issues
now
that
getting back
matters?
to the other issue of the Scottish MPs.
Yes.
What I said previously was that what happens in lots of places, we don't have an English Parliament. We have a UK Parliament, a Scottish Parliament, and a Welsh Assembly. So a lot of things that are discussed in the UK Parliament actually affect Scotland and Wales, and that's why is it. So unless we get England, a Parliament for England, this is a non-issue. It doesn't go anywhere. You know, and what it does, why by us politicians like the Tories and Labour getting us to discuss this, what they're doing is hiding their failures to build hospitals, schools, and provide employment and apprenticeships to people. The real issue that affect our lives every day.
Well, Kevin, can we have a smooth running on 4 federation states in the United Kingdom, the federal state, if we want Scottish Parliament, Welsh Parliament, Irish Parliament, and the English Parliament?
Well, I'd like to take up a little bit about the Scottish involvement in politics, because in this country over the last X amount of years we've had 3 Scottish MPs. We've had Alec Douglas-Hume, Conservative. We've had Tony Blair, Scottish, and we've had Gordon Blair, Scottish. Gordon made the biggest mistake of all. We'll have no more boom and bust. Anyone who studied economics knows that boom and bust are part of the capitalist economy. Right. So it's not a question of would a Scottish politician or a Scottish development be any better, because English MPs, and there have been Welsh prime ministers in the country before, you know, they can only do what capitalism will allow them to do. You know, so you know, we're a party that's standing for the abolition of capitalism and the substitution with socialism, and all these things that to these 2 parties, the UKIP and LibDems, get concerned about. Well, we think they're important, but really irrelevant to the bigger picture of establishing socialism.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
how irrelevant is the stand of the UKIP when it comes to devolution?
Hugely relevant. We are the political energy of this country. It's basically how high shall I jump, sir? As that's what Cameron says to Farage. Farage clicks his fingers, Cameron jumps. So hugely, as I said earlier, this is a 2010 manifesto pledge. It was a 2011 UKIP paper, Union for the Future.
So,
and basically Cameron's
isn't it
skipping
for
along.
Political expediency. Cameron wants to earn some more voters away from the UKIP. Is it the reason why he's trying to whip up the emotions of the English
No,
people to
I
support
don't
him?
think emotions have been whipped up about this at all. As you mentioned earlier about the West Lothian question, and that came from the 70s. This issue has been bubbling away in the background in British politics since the 1970s. It's only now that because the Scottish nationalists were successful in winning their election in Scotland that this has come to the head. Now, to me, I just don't understand the logic. If you're SNP, you want Scotland to be devolved, okay, you want even more powers than the powers you already have, and yet at the same time you're seeking to vote on matters in England and over the England and Wales. However, if we in Westminster were to seek to vote or interfere in the areas that Scotland has devolved, then we would have uproar. It's just unfair. It is fundamentally unfair. You either have a federated system or you don't. Why don't we just scrap all the assemblies?
But Liberal Democrats in your manifesto stated that you would redefine the English stand in the devolution in a constitutional convention. So what kind of convention would your party come up with to make the stand of English in this devolution?
Well, I mean, we've always believed in devolution, whether it's be along federal lines or even from central government to local government. We believe more powers should be given to local government even. But how that happens, how it manifests, what's the best way forward that would benefit the people, that's the important bit, not tribal politics, what the Labour Party has been playing with. I'm actually going to agree for once in my life with UKIP that they are right. It is power politics. The Labour Party clearly knows its power. Based in Scotland, they want to involve in England so they can win the seats and they can have that.
Well, Kevin.
Well, tribal politics, Nigel Clegg's picked this up. Politics by its very nature is tribal. I mean, you know, the Conservatives and Labour, they're both capitalist parties, but they say, well, we've got a different view of this. The Labour Party call themselves socialists, which they're not. Well, actually, they don't mention that word so much now. UKIP are trying to get some territory for themselves. The LibDems, as I said before, they're really Tories without the kicking boots on. They want a nice face of capitalism. But Labour and Lib Dems, they're both reformist parties. None of them want to change capitalism. And you've got this ridiculous situation where people being charged for bedroom tax. Lib Dems and the Conservatives believing in all this rubbish, and no one's going for the mention tax. You know, when are the rich getting hit? They're never hit. And these two parties, the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, they're never going to go for them.
So when we consider this devolution, we know that Scotland is a little bit, they're enjoying a little bit of subsidy when it comes to education, because they are not paying education at all. When it comes to certain important policies and programs to reform the Scottish economy, they are enjoying it. Do you think that this is a motivating factor for the capitalist party like the Liberal, the UKIP and Conservative wanting to get the Scottish to a level whereby they will all say, yes, we want to have them at the same as the capitalist institutions?
Well, I think that there's no reason to suspect that the people in Scotland or the Scotland as a country doesn't contribute to England, because I don't know what the current situation is about oil in the North Sea, but there may be quite a lot of revenues coming back to England, Britain, as part of the tax ceded from the oil companies. So it's not all one-way traffic.
Well, listeners, it's time approximately 7:30, and you are listening to Insight on Voice of Africa Radio. I am in the studios with Elizabeth Jones, SADC chairwoman and prospective candidate for Dartford. Pretty soon, maybe Elizabeth will be in the Westminster to see that Scottish MPs will not be given the chance to vote in matters that borders on England or English people. Mahmoud Fiaz, a prospective candidate for me, who also, and I have Kevin. He is from the Socialist Party of Great Britain International, who is advocating for work for no money, the abolition of salary structure and wages. Discussing this important issue with me on this show. Elizabeth.
Yes.
Just some few weeks ago, the three great major parties in United Kingdom all trooped to the shores of Scotland to give them promises that they know they cannot fulfill when it comes to devolution. Gordon Brown was a Labour, he was campaigning for the no, and Alistair Darling was campaigning for the no. To come back to Westminster to say that we were deceived, isn't it a blow to the faces of the yes campaigners?
I don't know if it's a blow or not, really, but as I said earlier, I don't understand the mentality of the yes campaigners. If you are seeking further and further devolution, you don't want Westminster to vote or interfere in your policy areas, which, as I said, the devolved policy areas are health, education, housing, sports and arts, agriculture, forestry, fishing, tourism, planning, social work and emergency services. You want those ring-fenced, so only you can consider those, and yet you demand the right to oversee and vote in and have a hand in policies that affect the country south of the border. So I just don't understand the mentality. I really don't get it.
The question is, do you think this law would work?
Well, I mean, it seems to have worked so far with the devolution of Wales and Scotland. I mean, Wales has less devolved powers. Wales has devolved powers with regard to agriculture, agriculture, fisheries. Not so many as the Scottish Assembly. Yes, of course, I think it would work.
And what would be the format for this devolution if we say Scottish people will not be allowed to vote in Parliament? What do you think the Scottish MPs will do when they come to Westminster?
Well, I mean, again, it's not an English Parliament, it's a UK Parliament. We keep forgetting, we keep going England.
Yeah, but what we are saying is, we want them there, but we don't want them to interfere in matters that really borders on...
Well, because they're part of the UK Parliament, by default, they get to vote, you see.
So we cannot say that we would not want the Scottish.
Well,
MPs
as long as you have a UK Parliament, by default they can vote,
Elizabeth,
and they're going to vote for what's best for Scottish, for their people.
As long as we have the UK Parliament,
yes,
by default they have every right to vote. So there can never be any English law for English voters.
No, we don't accept that because, as I said earlier, the Scottish Assembly has devolved powers over certain devolved policies.
How would that work?
Well, what we would seek to do is perhaps, as I say, remove the Scottish MPs from the House of Commons, or in the alternative, reduce the number of Scottish MPs as they have devolved powers, so they don't need to be involved in the debates that those devolved powers touch on. However, they can be involved in the debates concerning defence, foreign policy and employment. Just have fewer Scottish MPs because, as I say, they've got the devolved powers of the Scottish Assembly, and also the Scottish MP numbers are disproportionate when compared to the size of the electorate, so reduce their numbers.
If we take Scottish MPs from Westminster, as Elizabeth is proposing now, or she is suggesting now, how can a Scottish MP become a Prime Minister of Great Britain?
Well, I'm not sure that that's the case. I think a lot of this hinges around the West Lothian question, that they're allowed to vote in British Parliament or UK Parliament, and the English MPs don't, unless they don't have. I don't think they have a similar situation. But the business about the devolution to Scotland, I think a lot of the concern wasn't just about independence; it was about finance, it was about money, because the view was that Scotland alone, this was a Conservative point of view and a LibDem, Scotland alone would not be able to trade as well financially as if they were part of the UK arrangement. And of course there was a massive movement of money away from Scottish financial concerns prior to the actual vote.
Well, now if we bring in finances, Scottish contribute to the United Kingdom as well, and the Barnett Agreement is in favour, as the English MPs are saying, favours the Scottish. So would that be an influence?
Well, I mean, it depends how you count your pennies, because don't forget, large amount of oil comes, and a lot of the oil taxes that me and you pay through buying it goes to UK government. So I'm not sure whether where the favouritism or isn't. That's maybe a fudged issue. There may be pennies being hidden behind someone's back in actually how the share sort of works out, really. On the question of the finances, yes, Kevin is right. What happened up to the independent vote, when they may be winning, a lot of the financial institutes actually grabbed on, and trade actually stopped in Scotland. A lot of the large companies said if Scotland becomes independent, because there's no formula at the moment to trade with the EC, which is our biggest trading partner, we cannot invest in it. And all investment by private investment in Scotland was put on hold. But that's just, a system of how it works. And I said that on the radio program that actually had happened.
Elizabeth,
yes,
if we know all this problem for long ago, 70s West Lothian question, why didn't we fix it but now, after the
well, it's only
referendum?
It's only really come to a head because of the Labour Party's meddling in 1997 and seeking to federalise the United Kingdom, and that's why we've now got the Wales Assembly, Northern Ireland and Scotland. This chaos has been caused, I say, by the Labour Party, and it's been brought to a head by the SNP winning the Scottish Parliament election, because the SNP's platform was independence from UK. That's what they wanted. That's what they had their vote for. And in fact, Gordon Brown, one of his promises is that he wanted Scotland to have 75% of its tax revenues returned to it. So it would maintain 75% of the tax return and get a lump sum Barnett set grant. So this is what they wanted, and all this has been caused by Labour. I just find it incredible that anyone would vote Labour these days. The most puerile party ever. When you think about the history that they've had, that they're now reduced to this.
Well, it's still 36 minutes after 7 o'clock on Voice of Africa Radio. The program is Insight. We're talking about the Scottish devolution and the English law for English voters for English law. How can this work? Is up to the politicians to see how it works. But we are here. I have Kevin Elizabeth and Mahmoud first, who are discussing this on Voice of Africa Radio. Let me take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we continue with this issue. Stay tuned and don't go away. Welcome back from the commercial break, and it's 42 minutes after 7 o'clock on Voice of Africa Radio. Elizabeth Jones, Mahmoud Fiaz, and Kevin Parkins in the studio discussing this important issue. Mr. Brown has said that if this bill, if the suggestion of conservative is considered, they would undermine the United Kingdom. How would this undermine the United Kingdom if we ask the Scottish MPs not to vote in English, not to vote on English matters?
It wouldn't undermine the United Kingdom at all. It would simply undermine the Labour Party's power base. Gordon Brown is merely self-interested and only considering the interests of the Labour Party. It's Labour Party first, second and last. And let's face it, this has all been started by the Labour Party in 1997. I see it as an entirely self-protective measure.
How did they start this whole thing?
They were the ones who brought in legislation to encourage, obviously UKIP supports referendums as well, but to encourage referendums with regard to federalisation and gave effect to that. Labour's real aim is to atomise this country and have this country broken down into federalised regions. However, the public have resisted that. In 2004, there was the referendum for the northeast area of England to have a separate assembly. This was rejected roundly by the public. In 2012, the Regional Development Agency was dropped, and in 2011, the A+ quasi PR system was dropped. So the public have rejected this manoeuvre to atomise the country, and Gordon Brown is entirely self-interested.
But if he's self-interested, why would he have supported the yes campaign, the no campaign when the Scottish wanted independence?
Because he's an MP. He's an MP. He's not in the Scottish Assembly. He's an MP based in Westminster.
It's Westminster, yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's got a lucrative job as well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Now, the question is, they want to get him not to vote on English issues. So if he had said, okay, I want to go with the Scottish, those saying that we want Scotland to be independent nations, wouldn't he have still continued his job as an MP?
Well, no, because the Labour Party lost that percentage of Scottish voters, or Scottish MPs in the House of Commons. That's why.
So do you support that we should have the Scottish MPs not voting in this issue? Because
no, what we support is a total devolution, where, for example, you get more representation, English people, Scottish people, Welsh people, and I think if you had smaller assemblies, smaller governments can sometimes function much better than much larger governments.
The argument, let me come to Elizabeth before I go to Kevin. The argument is you want the Scottish because of the Barnett Agreement that they are getting more money. And they decide on certain things that, certain issues like education and health. And now, the three major parties in the UK, during the referendum, promised them more, knowing the fact that they still have an impending issue of further devolution and wanting the Scottish MPs not to vote on English issues. Why then were they promised big issues like they will increase their taxes? Scottish, they will be given more powers to increase their taxes and look after the social or welfare system. Why?
Well, with power comes responsibility. If Scotland wants those powers, it has to accept that there will be strings attached. You're simply not going to get powers without as the Scottish Nationalist Party called it, the Tory strings attached.
So the strings attached to these powers is to deny the Scottish MP the right to vote on English matters.
Well, it's not on totally English matters, as I say. The reserved powers are defence, foreign policy and employment. But do you want to be 99% independent of of England and Wales, or what? What do you want? You can't have it all. I found it absolutely incredible that during the lead up to the referendum, we had the Scottish nationalist leader demanding, Alex Salmond, demanding from Westminster that not only should Westminster give 100% of the tax revenue to Scotland, but continue to pay the Barnett lump sum formula as well.
Isn't a bargain?
Incredible.
He's in the interest of his people that he is arguing that if you can afford, and we have the North Sea oil, which is turning up revenue to England. Most of the industrial hub is in Scotland. The buses, everything that they are doing. We have our nuclear arsenal over there. So they said we want more money to keep this, to educate our people. Isn't a fairer arrangement or fairer negotiation made by the Scottish Nationalist Party?
It's not the Scottish nuclear arsenal.
No, it's
England,
the
part of the UK
United
Defence
Kingdom. Yes,
initiative. You know, I think the SNP basically believe they could run capitalism better than the Labour Party and the Tory Party, and you know, so and then in fact, they could be a bit more famous, a bit more career movement. And what's his Salmon's gone now, and so we got Nicola Sturgeon, and the idea, you know, because there is quite a lot of poverty in Scotland, and I think they felt that perhaps they could do more being in charge rather than, you know, in the rubbish from Cameron and Clegg. So you know, I think that's got to be taken into account.
Well, enough of this, and we will see if 2015 the Labour Party promised that they should have some constitutional changes, or the Liberal Democrats saying they need a constitutional convention to sort this issue out. So 2015, after the elections, we see what will be happening as far as the Scottish devolution is concerned. Elizabeth, let's look at historical event, the stoling of artifacts from Africa, Greece, and other parts of the world to United Kingdom and some parts of the globe.
Well, very well. As you're aware, that has been recently in the press is the contentious issue of the return of the Elgin marbles, which has been spearheaded by George Clooney via his wife, is it Amal? And we've all seen the photographs of her and Jeffrey Robertson QC off to Athens. And of course we've had the trite teenage Labour bullshit of Jeremy Corbyn MP saying, oh, Britain stole the marbles from Greece. Britain did not steal the marbles from Greece at all. It's been historically proven time and time again that the Earl of Elgin, he had a permit from the Ottoman House between 1799 to 1803. He got a permit to enter that area and to remove those marbles.
Who gave him the permit to enter that area and remove those marbles? The
Ottoman leader of that area, because during that time Greece was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. And I'll tell you why he granted the Earl of Elgin these marbles. He granted them because he was very grateful to the British, because the British had repelled the Napoleonic expansion. Furthermore, these marbles had absolutely no sentimental value to the Ottoman Empire, and they're quite happy for them to go. Furthermore, the statues were in bad condition.
But we know that it did not belong to the Ottoman Empire. It never belonged to the Muslims.
Well, who can say? One of the most fundamental aspects of any society is the law of tenure, the law of ownership. Now, this happened, about 1799, 1803. Enough time has passed. Furthermore, when the marbles came back to the United Kingdom, the British government bought them from Earl of Elgin at below market price. I don't think he even got the costs of transporting them to United Kingdom. And they've been in the British Museum ever since. And in order to ensure this,
Elizabeth,
yes,
having bought it at a lower rate and knowing the fact that you acquired it at a lower rate, Kevin,
Royal Mail, yeah. It's sold out of London, it's worth. Yeah.
Don't you think it's high time England sent it back to the Greeks?
Well, the business about taking goods or wealth from one country to another is part of the whole imperialist process. You know, not just England or Britain, but Spain, Portugal, Belgium, France. They've all been countries with an imperialist past. I mean, I would have thought, as important as the Elgin marbles might be to the Greeks, there are so many other things going into country worthy of concern rather than some marbles. I mean, you know, we're still going through this period of austerity in this country, The whole idea that it was going to banish child poverty it's not worked. We got there's things going on in Africa, with the Ebola, and more attention should be diverted to things like that. I'm not over concerned about a bunch of marbles personally. I mean.
But that represents the culture of the people, and the artifacts is now becoming money. So if money belongs to a state, wouldn't it be prudent for the marble or the artifact to be sent to that state to benefit out of it?
I think that's right. I mean, I don't know what the various financial agreement was at the time, but Elizabeth, Elizabeth Carroll?
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, sorry, yeah. She may done a much more discursive study
Mahmoud,
of this, but
artifacts and nowadays displaying of artifacts in museum, which of course people are agitating that those artifacts taken from Africa, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana, and Iraq should be sent back to those countries for the people to
purely from personal point of view. I think you hit the nail on the head. The Ottomans were an invading force. They have no right to give authority to another country to take goods from it. The rest just becomes irrelevant, really, becomes grey hair, and I absolutely agree with you. If, for example, during the Iraq War, their forces came in, took things that belonged to the nation of Iraq, and I think they should return them. And that should go.
Yes.
Mahmoud says it's becoming irrelevant. Any invasion force and the authorization given for a legitimate person to acquire property out of invasion becomes irrelevant because of the pretext of the circumstances under which those artifacts were acquired.
Well, he's wrong in law, because this happened in about 1799, between 1799 and 1803, that the Earl of Elgin resolved his issues or got his permit from the Ottoman Empire. It's too long ago. It's too long ago for us to interfere.
Those days, laws were not working.
It's too long ago. It's beyond the act of limitation has passed. There's nothing you can do. And furthermore, it's been surpassed now by the British Museum Act 1963. The British Museum Act 1963, Section 5, forbids anyone from disposing, gifting, exchanging any item in the British Museum unless that object is a duplicate of an original, unless it can be shown that that object is no earlier than 1850. So any object that's created pre-1850 you simply cannot remove, and there has to be a copy, or it's unfit, that it is so damaged that it's not going to be used. And this is done, a lot of thought.
If it's unfit for a purpose, then we can give it back to the host nation. But if it's worthy of seeing,
yes,
we must keep it in England.
Yes, and there's been a lot of thought and a lot of parliamentary discussion went into the creation of this Act, the British Museum Act 1963. So ancient artefacts such as the Elgin marbles, I'm sorry, are going to be here to stay. And also we have to consider the historical background of Greece. I appreciate Greece is a wonderful country. However, it is from quite a brittle region of the world. As I mentioned earlier, the Earl of Elgin was allowed to have these marbles partly because the British Army had been involved in driving Napoleon away from the Ionian Islands.
So as a sense of
gratitude, yes,
we gave him to take it.
A sense of gratitude, yes.
Well, listeners, you still tune into Voice of Africa Radio, 55 minutes after 7 o'clock. And as you know, we wouldn't have much time to deliberate upon this issue. But before we go, Kevin's Scottish MPs not being allowed to vote on Scottish English issues. Your advice and your final thought? I'm
not really over concerned about it, to be honest.
You are concerned about capitalism and socialism?
I'm more concerned about how the system works. I mean, business about the marbles, it was one rich person giving conferring a gift on another rich person.
And therefore the nation wants it back. Don't you think it's prudent for the Greek to...
I think there's a good argument for returning the Elgin marbles.
And this is a situation whereby we've enacted a law.
There's not... if this doesn't sound too flippant... when the British went out to Africa, and they took a lot of the riches back from Africa to England, they left the Bible, So they give out. Perhaps we should get some of the Bibles back.
So we should get the Bibles back to England.
Get the Bibles back and give the land, and then give the land back
to Mahmoud, your final word to the listeners. Kevin is saying we want the Bible back to England and give the Africans their gold.
Yeah, give their land back.
Well, I mean, as a Muslim, it would be wrong for me to comment on that because it's interpreted entirely different. But I think, there needs to be fair play and fair society. It's okay saying something in law, but who made that law? It wasn't a fair law made at that time. So the Greece people had no say in that law that was made. It was made by the British, for the British. The Ottoman gave it as a favour for doing the Ottomans' work and pushing back the French.
Well, Elizabeth.
Well, I'm just following on from the Socialist Party of Great Britain speaker's comment, which is very apt, I think, because I don't think that your listeners will be aware, but there are far more many English pence in Sweden than there are in England because of the terrible traumas that this country suffered as a result of repeated Viking raids. In 991, the Vikings took about £10,000 worth of gold.
Which
in 1007.
was acquired from Africa.
No. Well, it's from this. We're talking about
any deposit of gold in England.
Yes, we do have gold and silver in England.
All right.
So this is 900. This is 991. £10,000 worth of silver. 1007, £36,000 worth of silver. 1012, the murder of the Archbishop of Canterbury by the Vikings, £48,000 worth of silver. A vast amount of our wealth and monies have gone to the Vikings. So when is Sweden and Denmark and Norway going to hand those back? Never, of course. We don't ask for them back, and we don't think that the because we take an adult approach.
If we take them back, we will be giving more than what we've acquired from Sweden. I thank you very much for being
the Swedes did give us ABBA.
Yes, I thank you very much for being part of this program starting from 7 till now. Catch us same time next week between the hours of 7 and 8, and do stay tuned to Voice of Africa Radio. You heard Elizabeth Jones, UKIP parliamentary candidate for Dartford, Kevin Parkins, Socialist Party of Great Britain, and a prospective parliamentary candidate for London constituency, Mahmoud Fiaz of LibDem, Leighton and Wanstead, and also, in my view, a parliamentary candidate. Do stay tuned and don't go.